Welcome to the Paper Talk podcast, where we have candid conversations with emerging artists and industry leaders about all things paper flowers. Through this podcast, we hope to continue to share knowledge, connect all of us together, and elevate the artistry of each and every one of us.
Hello, I'm Quynh.
I'm Jessie Chu.
I'm Priscilla Park.
Our mission is to share,
connect,
and elevate the paper floral industry.
We are some of the voices behind the Paper Florist Collective. Welcome to our podcast, Paper Talk. Hello, everybody. You're listening to episode number 21 over coffee. Today, we're going to talk about, and we've been getting a lot of questions about this, how to preserve your flowers. Jessie and I were talking about it. It's like this topic has come over and over in the Facebook group. And we want to address this because there's so many different ways to preserve your flowers and also reason why you want to preserve your flowers or not preserve your flowers. I would say your paper flowers are like artwork. And there's definitely things that you can do it. One of our favorite that keeps being brought over and over is definitely the UV rayon sprays.
Yeah. So the UV resistant spray comes in matte and gloss. And the one I think that most of us use is Quynh because it's available in North America. But there are other UV resistant sprays of an archival nature. You don't have to rely on the brand, just as long as the purpose of the spray is archival, meaning, it maintains the color, mainly the color of the item, then you can use that. The only thing I would suggest is test it on a small area first of your paper because it can change the color of your paper or your pastels, I would say.
And also make sure you do it in a well-ventilated area. It gets very, very stinky. And the really important thing to know, if you do spray it, leave it out for 2 to 3 days to air it out. You don't want to give it to your bride or mail it in a box where it's going to sit there after you spray it, because when they open it, the fumes is going to be, it's bad, you guys.
It's not the fresh flower smell. No. It's nasty chemical smell that they smell when they open this beautiful package.
Exactly. So make sure you air it out before you package it or you give it to anyone. Because it's a great time to cure your paper flowers, to look at it, to see if you need to tweak it here or there. But make sure you do air it out. It makes a big difference.
I have to say that I'm notorious for doing things last minute in terms of shipping it off. So spraying it usually is my very last thing that I do. But yeah, the other thing is spraying your flowers as you go along, as you're building your bouquet or arrangement. And that way, at the very end, you don't have to be stuck with, leaving a day or two where your deadline might be really tight.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's really important.
The other thing is, I would suggest if you're spraying fine crepe paper, do it very lightly.
So lightly.
Yeah, it changes the shape of it. And that's the last thing you want. You're working so hard on this paper flower and then suddenly it looks like it's drooping. Layer. I would say that's probably what Jody of Design Master would say, layer on.
8 to 12 inches, spray it that far away. Yeah. You do not want to be 5 inches. Otherwise, you're going to get a big glob. Yes. It's not pretty. Yeah. And the texture changes quite a bit. Also think about, don't use spray. Think about using some sort of coating on it. And when I say coating, you can use acrylic paint that really layers the color on really well. Design Master is really great, especially for developing the changes and working with the paper. So as the paper changes, as it ages, the spray tint will actually work with it a little bit better. So think about that, how you can use that. Pen Pastels does coat it a little bit, but not as much. Alcohol ink is another really interesting platform. It will fade over time. It's not reliable.
It does fade I think it fades actually quite quickly, depending on what color you use and how intense the colors are. So that usually, I recommend, I think the only option would be spray or, you love Mod Podge. So some sort of, layer on top for that. I was going to go back to say pastel does not preserve your paper at all. The other thing is with pastels, I generally use a spray with it just because it can rub off. And so if it rubs off, the last thing you want is you've got pastel powder all over your bride's white dress. So that's another reason why you might want to spray too.
So important.
Yeah. But Quynh loves using Mod Podge, and I think that's a great way as well to create that kind of extra layer on top
of. And the Mod Podge, I really use it for foliages. It really, because, some leaves has that really shiny coat. So I love using the glossy on that, but you can also use the matte. The matte has a thinner coat and it doesn't look so glossy or plasticky looking. Yeah, not as obvious. And the thing is, For paper petals, I would actually use the matte because it gives a nice coating on it. And what I do is I actually coat the full sheet of it. And I usually do this on extra fine. Extra fine, you have to be very, very careful. The paper is so thin, it will actually warp the paper a little bit. So be very careful how you apply that on extra fine. But I find it on doublet to be amazing. It holds up really well. I usually only coat one side of it, the color that I want to represent on the flower. And that seems to work really, really well.
I can imagine just having a coat over it might help. But do you think that would help with humidity as well?
It's almost like a protective layer, especially if you're doing like more like, I would say orchid would really, because you need that extra firm texture, stiffness to it. I think it works really well.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, I haven't tried this, but I mean, after working on my butterfly ring necklace, having certain mediums or fluids, they're acrylic fluids. So it naturally has this kind of, I don't want to say plasticky, but it really is a really thin layer of plastic. It probably is actually polymer or something. Ultimately protect the paper because acrylic, I mean, if you ever have acrylic dry on like glass or something and you're trying to like scrape it off, when it's not totally dry, it gets kind of sticky. It's like this like webbing kind of thing. So I can only imagine something like that where you're using a medium, whether it's a gloss medium, whether it's a thickening medium, or in this case, the iridescent medium, that would provide somewhat of a protection over your petals.
I did this one experiment at the very beginning of my career. I was using really bad quality floral tape, and I thought using the Mod Podge on the floral tape on the stem would protect it more, but don't do it, people. Don't do it. So what happened was I found out because I was adding my paper flowers to fresh foliage and people were putting it in the water, it will actually dissolve and turn the whole stem white. Yeah.
Oh,
so
gosh.
don't do it.
Don't do it. Just leave the floral tape. The floral tip is good enough. I can go in water, but not much Podge.
So just be very, very careful about that. Floral tape will actually stick really well in water and you don't have to worry about it. It was a very interesting lesson to learn. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't test it. And luckily my friend saw it and she was like, this is what happened. I was like, oh my gosh.
I know some people have tried using beeswax.
Yes.
To kind of can use the word seal in the paper and try to preserve it and make it waterproof. I know people have tried that. I think that's a really cool technique to try. I haven't tried it because I've used beeswax in the past making like lotion, like all natural organic lotion. And let me tell you, you need like a whole set of beeswax only tools and apparatus because that stuff does not get off and you don't want it to be pouring it down the drain. There's so many things that you cannot do with it that's not safe because it will ruin other things that, I haven't tried because I feel like it's an investment, but I've heard great things.
I know Cats on the Air. They do it a lot. I think Lynn Dolan, who else does it? But yeah, you're right. That you have to be very, very careful. Know your materials, know your supplies before you invest in a lot of money and talk to other people that have done it and ask about the pros and cons of using it.
Somebody was telling me, who was it? Somebody was telling me they used an old like crock pot, which is great because you can keep it warm, right? But I mean, this is if you have something spare.
Like a mini one. You don't want a large one.
Like a mini one. Yeah, like a mini one. You just fill it with beeswax and then have it plugged in and at a warm temperature where you can just dip your flower in. I mean, that's obviously scary too because you don't know what that shape of that flower will look like when it comes out. And if you're using hot glue, that's a no-no. Your petals will fall right off. So I guess like a lot of experimenting would be really interesting to see what, you guys can do after if you hear this podcast and you're like, I want to try that. Definitely show us. I'm super interested in seeing how, like, what the results could be.
Tell us about your experience. Like, share it with the community and let us know, like, why you love using it, why you don't love using it. And also a really big thing, if as you guys go on the Facebook and you go in the Paper Florist Collective, so many of these topics that we're talking about has already been discussed. Do a search real quick and search for it before you ask your question, because sometimes that question might already be answered already.
Yeah, in depth too. I mean, when we answer these questions, I mean, people are just so willing to share their experiences. And so a lot of times you'll see, the discussion being, 20 people involved and it's a long thread. You'll find it really invaluable to do those searches.
Yeah. And sometimes when you repost that question again, it's like, I already answered that. Why do I need to respond again? So that's why do your research first, do the search. That's why the search is there and see if that question's already been asked.
Absolutely. I mean, on this particular topic, we can, as artists, only do so much, right? We can protect our work. We can spray it. We can Mod Podge it. We can use acrylics or, something that that won't fade as much. But I mean, I think the most important part is communicating to your customer, if that is your concern, that the customer may complain about the change in color, communicating to them about how to properly take care of the paper flowers. Because like Quynh said, your paper flowers, treat it as art. It is art. You spend so much time on it. They're paying you a lot of money to create this, beautiful piece. The last thing they should be doing is throwing it around and placing it right outside, like right beside a window, right? You wouldn't do that to your Picasso, to your Van Gogh. You shouldn't be doing that to your paper flowers. And so I think you need to make clear to your client, whether it's in an email or if you have little cards that you print out that tells them how to take care of their paper flowers.
Exactly.
I mean, preserving is not just UV rays, it's water is an issue too, right? So, I mean, if they expect to be able to carry their bouquet outdoors and it's pouring outside, that's something that you have to communicate to them too, is that, no, you can't do that. And to convey to them that no matter what they want, no, you're spending a lot of time on this. It's art. No, they should not be doing that. Even if they really want to, I mean, I would advise them not to. I'd be like, you know what, have a backup plan. Just as your hairdresser probably would not let you outside when it's pouring rain, I, as an artist who is making your bouquet, I'm not comfortable having you run out there in pouring rain with the bouquet. Like, I think that's a legitimate request. I mean, yes, it's important what your clients want, but at the same time, they also have to understand the boundaries. Essentially, how can they what can they do with the bouquet? How much can they push that paper flower? It's paper, ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just doing that precaution, talking to your bride and saying, hey, this is actually, it's made out of paper. You bought it for a reason. It's valuable. Take care of it. Important thing is, like, even on the day of the wedding, it's okay to be outside for one day. It won't harm the flower. So it's totally fine. But when they keep it as a keepsake, tell them they need to take care of it. It needs to be away from the window. It needs to be away from water. And that's your responsibility communicating to your customer. And so the really important part, once you pass it on, it's really no longer your responsibility. So giving that extra care, instructions for them to take care of it is always a great thing.
Absolutely. I actually don't mind a bit of fading in my paper flowers, but that's from an artist perspective.
Yes, me too.
To be honest, when it does fade very, very slowly, you don't even notice it. It just
that character.
Character to it. When I did the window display for the paper place, and you've been to my house, you've seen it.
It's amazing.
You cannot tell. Cannot tell that the leaves are faded. So the leaves I used, it was like a Chinese crepe paper, and that actually held up pretty well. It was the Italian that was like no go, but you can't even tell. You didn't see it from the day one. You would have no idea that it faded because it faded into this beautiful,
like lemony yellow
green. Yeah, it was like it was almost gold, not gold, but like it conveyed the idea of gold, like a fall.
It was like a golden green.
Yes,
really
a golden
pretty.
green. It was really pretty. So, I mean, I think, yes, fading maybe is a concern for, sometimes when you really don't want it to fade, but other times I think just embrace it. That is just your medium.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the property of your medium. And there's beauty in that too.
Yeah. So just understand what you're working with, all the different art materials that you're applying onto it. Just understand what it'll do to your paper, and you'll just be a stronger artist from there. Cool. Yeah. So thank you so much, everybody. We really enjoyed giving you this pro tip about how to take care of your paper flowers before, during, and after. If you have any questions, head to the Paper Florist Facebook page. There's so many amazing, valuable tips, advice everyone's sharing on that particular platform. We love having you there. We love seeing everyone questions. So don't be afraid to ask questions. We're just asking you to search that question first and then ask your question. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.